All right, everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about something, uh, it's kind of controversial.
Yeah.
It's this idea that not everyone should have a say.
Interesting.
And we're going to be looking at some excerpts from a piece
Okay.
called Not Everyone Should Have a Say. What do you think about that title, just like right off the bat?
Well, I mean, it's certainly provocative.
Yeah.
It kind of flies in the face of what we're often taught.
Right.
About, everyone's voice being equal and
Yeah.
all that.
It's interesting because,
Yeah,
we do want to be inclusive.
of course.
But, are there times when maybe
Right.
not every voice should,
Carry the same weight.
carry the same weight?
Exactly. I think there are plenty of situations where, if we think about it logically,
Yeah.
expertise really does matter.
It does.
And the source material actually brings up a really
Okay.
interesting historical example.
Okay.
Of how, oh, hey, our listener wants to join in. What's up?
Hi, yes, it's David. I just proposed this topic about that nobody should have a say, because nowadays on social media it seems that everyone have a say. I mean, everyone have an opinion on everything. I mean, you say good morning, and everybody's just jumping in to say, oh, maybe it's good morning for you, but not for me. Whatever. Sometimes, in the more stupid sense, everybody seems to have a say, and that's unbelievable. Some people, you just shut up. Thank you.
Hey, David, thanks for chiming in. I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's definitely a common feeling these days with social media.
It feels like there's a constant barrage of opinions.
And as you said, sometimes those opinions are not particularly well informed.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of the heart of this not everyone should have a say idea.
It raises a really interesting question of when and how we should value different voices.
And it's not to say that we shouldn't want to be inclusive, but,
Right, it's about that weight that different voices carry.
So we were just getting into an example from history that touches on this.
It's about how some societies used to let everyone vote.
Yeah, like anyone could vote on stuff like military strategy.
And as you might imagine, that led to some seriously disastrous defeats.
Because you don't want to have, just anyone making calls on that.
Exactly. You need experienced generals making military decisions.
It highlights how decisions made without the right understanding can be dangerous.
And that ties into what you're saying about social media and all the opinions.
It's the idea of power to the people, but maybe it has some limits.
There are definitely limits, and that brings up another point.
Okay, what's that?
The tyranny of the majority concept, where the most popular opinion isn't always the best one.
That's a really interesting point.
Like, think about a jury trial where the majority can be swayed by emotions.
Yeah, instead of hard evidence and what really matters.
So how do we find a balance between expertise and inclusivity?
Yeah, that's really the question we're diving into.
And the source material actually speaks to this directly.
Oh, okay. What does it say?
It suggests that instead of equal votes, maybe we focus on diverse perspectives.
Like, make sure everyone is heard.
Exactly. Have expert panels, representative bodies that get diverse input.
So it's like a town hall meeting type of thing.
Yeah, where you gather input, but not everyone makes the final decision.
It's acknowledging that while everyone should be heard, not all voices carry the same weight in every decision.
Absolutely. We need experts, and those experts need to...
Oh, yeah. Go on.
Yeah, but sometimes we don't need to hear everyone. I mean, it is a waste of time to listen to everybody saying nonsense. So just don't stop this thing that we have to listen to everyone. No, not at all. I'm not agree with you at all. Thank you.
Okay, David, I hear you, and that's a great point.
It sounds like you're saying there's a point where too many voices can just be noise.
Right, like when you're just getting constant nonsense, it makes sense to tune it out.
And that's actually a really good point that connects with the rest of our discussion.
Yeah, because earlier, we were talking about how we want everyone to be included.
But it's not about just hearing everyone, but how much weight we give each voice. Well, David, you're very...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for instance, have you tried to follow up a discussion on YouTube, for example? You are trying to follow a discussion between two people or something, and then so many people just jumping in, saying nonsense. You can even read, because the flow of the messages, they are just crazy. It's just unbelievable. I mean, what are these people doing? Doing nothing, because even though nobody is going to read what they are saying, the nonsense they are saying, you know what I mean? It's just so crazy, it's so unbelievable. Sometimes I just fed up and just go away and go for a walk. Oh yes, indeed.
Oh my gosh, David, that YouTube example is so relatable.
Yeah, the way you described it, it's like a chaotic free-for-all.
It's that feeling of being overwhelmed by the sheer volume of nonsense,
And it really highlights the challenge we're talking about.
where it feels impossible to even follow a single train of thought.
Right, it's like you said, sometimes you just need to step away.
It's a perfect example of how too many voices can drown everything out.
And it seems like you're saying some voices, maybe the nonsense ones, shouldn't carry as much weight.
Exactly. And it's not about silencing people, it's about understanding which opinions are valuable.
Well, that really connects to what we were discussing about the tyranny of the majority.
Yeah, like listening to everyone isn't always the best way forward.
Because sometimes the most popular opinion isn't the most well-informed.
And that brings up another point from our source material.
It's about how we should filter through all that noise.
Oh, okay, what's that?
The source material also gets into how this idea applies in everyday life.
It's all about ensuring that the right people have a say in a given context.
Exactly. And I think that's what you're getting at, that sometimes you just don't want to hear everyone's opinion. Oh, go for it.
Yeah, have you tried to have a conversation on Twitter? I mean, it's just so crazy. It's just like a madhouse. You're trying to say something and then you've got 10,000 people jumping in, saying whatever, saying the opposite, because normally they say the opposite you are saying. So it seems that everyone has to have an opinion on everything, and that's, I don't think is right at all.
David, that Twitter example is spot on.
Yeah, it really is the Wild West of opinions, isn't it?
It feels like you can't say anything without someone immediately contradicting you.
And it seems like you're also saying that there's just a constant barrage of opinions on everything.
Yeah, like everyone needs to weigh in on every single topic.
Which is exactly what we were talking about earlier, how that could be really overwhelming.
It's like, how do you filter through all that to find the valuable stuff?
And it brings up a really good point from our source material, how this applies to everyday life.
It's about ensuring that the right people have a say in a given context.
Exactly. And I think you're highlighting how sometimes it feels like everyone has a say when they really shouldn't.
Yeah, it's about not letting the quantity of opinions drown out quality and expertise.
So with that in mind, let's get back to our discussion about diverse perspective.
And how they contribute to better decisions.
And these experts we were mentioning have to be aware of how their decisions impact everyone
Yeah, they need to really consider the impacts of all their decisions.
on all different groups of people.
It's not just about saying some voices are more important than others.
It's more about making sure everyone is represented in the decision-making process,
And that all perspectives are accounted for.
which means seeking out diverse voices, especially those that are marginalized.
And that might be where town hall meetings come in, which we touched on earlier.
Yeah, where you don't just have people shouting at each other, but where there's a good process.
It's about, back to our listener.
Yeah,
What's up?
I think I've got the solution. I would put a tax on opinion. I mean, you should pay a tax if you want to have an opinion. I mean, if you want to have 10 opinions, you have to pay 10 taxes, let's say. Okay, not very large, but a quite small amount of money. So you will think about what you are going to say when you have an opinion, because you have to touch your pocket, you know. So that, I think that will be much easier for the people to think about what they are going to say and the stupid nonsense they are going to say. Thank you very much. That will be very much helpful for all the world, worldwide. Thank you.
Okay, David, that's a really unique idea.
Yeah, a tax on opinions, that's definitely a new one for us.
It's interesting, though, because it gets at the idea of making people think before they speak.
And putting a price on having a voice, that's definitely a way to get people's attention.
It's a creative solution to that feeling that everyone is just throwing out their thoughts without thinking.
And that goes along with what we've been talking about this whole time, about how to value different voices.
It's like you're saying we should put a cost on contributing to the noise.
Right, it's like if you have to pay for it, maybe you'll think twice before adding to the
Yes,
chaos.
yes.
Well, it would certainly make people think about the value of their contributions.
This all ties back to ensuring that the right people have a say in the right context.
So now that we've explored that idea a little bit,
Hey,
Yeah,
what's up?
Yeah, if we can explore these ideas you are saying, how much would you pay to give an opinion yourself? How much would you pay?
Well, that's a fascinating question, David, and it really puts us on the spot.
yeah, it does make you think, doesn't it?
I mean, we've been discussing how to value different voices.
And whether some opinions should carry more weight,
So if there were a cost to having an opinion, where would we draw that line?
and how much would be too much.
It's tricky because as podcasters, our opinions are kind of our stock in trade.
Yeah, it's like, how much would I pay to do this show?
And it does make you consider, well, how much do I value what I have to say?
And, would that cost change depending on the context?
Like, would you pay more to weigh in on a critical political decision?
Than for an opinion on what's the best brand of coffee?
Well, that makes you think about, oh, yeah,
Yeah. For instance, do you remember the SMS messages? I mean, you have to pay for that. You had to pay. I don't remember if it was 10p or 10 cents or 15 cents. The SMS messages were fantastic because you have to pay. You have a limited amount of words to say, and you really think about what you are going to think. But now with WhatsApp, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. You are getting 200, 300 messages from people. Sometimes you don't know even them. So it's just unbelievable. Why? Because it's free. So free. No paying money is just nonsense. We have to pay in order to think about what we are going to say. That's the matter of the problem. Thank you.
David, that's a fantastic point about SMS messages.
Yeah, it's so true. You really did have to think about what you said.
That word limit and having to pay per message, it forced a kind of economy of language.
Yeah, and now it's like with WhatsApp, you have this deluge.
It's a perfect example of how something like cost or even limited space can shape the way we communicate.
It really changed the way people talk with each other.
It's like you're saying the free aspect makes it feel less valuable, maybe, and you think less about what you say.
Right, and it makes you think about the connection between cost and value.
That connects back to what we were just talking about. How much would we pay to give an opinion?
Yeah, the idea of a tax on opinions, which was so interesting that you brought up.
So with that in mind, and this great example of SMS messages, let's get back to the source material
Okay, we were talking about you to make sure that all perspectives are considered.
and how we can avoid defaulting to the loudest voices.
There's a good process for that. It's about getting all perspectives.
Which means not just hearing a lot of voices, but hearing from different kinds of people.
And that also means making sure experts are aware of how their decisions impact everyone.
Yeah, they need to really consider the impacts of all their decisions.
On all different groups of people. And that also goes for the opinions.
It's not just about saying some voices are more important than others,
It's more about making sure everyone is represented in the decision-making process,
and that all perspectives are accounted for and valued.
which means seeking out diverse voices, especially those that are marginalized.
And that might be where town hall meetings come in, which we touched on earlier.
Yeah, where you don't just have people shouting at each other, but where there's a good process.
It's about ensuring we're not defaulting to the loudest voices,
But instead, we're working to make sure that all perspectives are considered.
and so we get the best results overall, create a more balanced outcome.
So thank you for your feedback, David. It's been very valuable to this conversation.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. Thanks for joining us today.
And that's all the time.
Yep.
Yeah,
Go on.
no, don't go away. You want to go away very much, but this is free, so we can carry on with the conversation. I was thinking that in the same way that when something is free, everybody seems to chip in and talk about, as I'm doing right now. Do you remember when making pictures, when taking photos? I mean, when you have a film roll, you only have, let's say, 24 pictures, 24 photos or 36. That I think it was the maximum. But now with the cameras, you can make thousands of pictures. But these pictures, nobody is going to watch them. So what's the point in taking so many pictures if after your trip you are not going to watch these films, these pictures? It's just so crazy. So I'm turning back to the point that free things, that's the value, the value of the thing. So let's put a tax or a charge on everything. Thank you.
Well, David, that's a fantastic point about the old film cameras.
Yeah, it's like there was a built-in constraint that made each shot more valuable.
And it's exactly like you said, a great analogy for free versus paid opinions.
Because now with digital cameras, you can snap 1 million pics and nobody ever looks at them.
It's that idea of
Yes.
quantity versus quality, which is a theme in our discussion today.
It's so true. And it also applies to the point we were just making about diverse perspectives.
that the sheer volume of voices doesn't mean you have a good range of opinions.
Right. It's not just about hearing a lot of voices, but having a really good process for it.
Well, David, thanks for the great analogy. It really ties back into our main ideas.
Okay, so we were just getting to the end, but I think it's worth continuing.
Definitely. And it's not just about big political stuff either. This applies to our daily lives.
It really this idea can apply to our everyday lives as well.
Okay, David, I think I understand what you mean, though maybe a tax is a strong word for it.
Yeah, it seems like you're saying when things are free, people just sort of throw things out there without thinking.
Exactly. It's like there's less of a filter.
It ties into the whole conversation we've been having about the value of opinions.
And how maybe putting a cost or a limit on something makes us think more.
Like we were saying with those SMS messages, where you really had to consider each word.
Yeah, like think about your workplace. Have you ever been in a situation where the people making the call were totally out of touch?
It happens all the time, and that is why this discussion is so important.
It's about thinking critically about who has a say and in what context.
And ensuring that those decisions are both informed and equitable.
So now thinking about that, how do we make sure the right people have a say?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. How do we do it?
And the film roll analogy really hits that home.
With a limited number of photos, you really had to think about each shot.
And that brings us back to this whole idea of not everyone should have a say.
It's not that we want to silence people, but understand the value of the contribution.
And how to ensure that the best ideas are heard and considered.
So with that in mind, let's wrap up this episode.
And do that without silencing other voices that need to be heard.
Absolutely. That's what we all need to consider. A really important...
Probably we will have a solution with the AI. I mean, all the messages and the pictures and whatever should go through the AI, and the AI should decide whether this is worth it for the people to read or to watch. What do you think about that? You are very clever, you've got many bits on your head, so you could decide whether a message is worth it to read it or not. So probably the job is for you. What do you think about that?
That's a really interesting idea, David, using AI to filter content.
Yeah, it's like having an AI gatekeeper for all of our messages.
It's a very
Yes.
modern approach to the problem of
Yes.
information overload.
And it also ties back to the point you made about SMS messages.
How having those constraints forces people to think about what they say.
So maybe AI could introduce those constraints in a different way.
It raises a question of who gets to program the AI, though.
Yeah, who decides what the AI considers worth it?
It would have to be carefully considered to avoid bias. Oh, yeah, let's hear it.
No. But AI is so clever that they can program themselves. So no problem at all. The same AI is doing their job.
Okay, David, that's a really interesting take, that the AI could be self-governing.
Yeah, that's definitely a new level of autonomy that we hadn't considered for an AI.
It's like you're saying the AI could decide for itself what is worth reading.
And, maybe it would remove any of the bias by being completely objective.
But it also brings up a question, where does human input fit into all of that?
It's a really deep philosophical question because it has implications for power dynamics.
Like, if an AI decides what is worth it, what role do we play in that?
And that's something to consider when we talk about diverse perspectives.
And we've talked about that, how diverse perspectives are so important.
Absolutely. That's a key part of ensuring fair decisions.
And this AI idea also brings up what we were about to discuss.
It really does, because it's another way to make sure that all perspectives are considered.
And that we're not just defaulting to the loudest voices.
So with all of that in mind, let's get back to our planned points
Okay, we were talking about how to make sure all perspectives are considered.
and how we can avoid just defaulting to the loudest voices,
There's a good process for that involves getting many perspectives.
which means not just hearing a lot of voices, but diverse voices.
And that also means making sure experts are aware of the impacts of their decisions
Yeah, they need to really consider the impacts of their decisions.
on all different groups of people. And that goes for opinions too.
It's not about saying that some voices are more important
It's more about making sure that everyone is represented in the process.
and that all perspectives are accounted for and are valued.
That means seeking out those diverse voices, especially marginalized ones,
And that might be where town halls come in, like we touched on earlier.
where we create a structured environment instead of just a free-for-all,
It's about not just defaulting to the loudest voices.
but instead working to ensure all perspectives are considered.
And that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in.
Oh, go for
No,
it.
stop, just a little bit. Let's say if we carry on with this idea that AI has to decide if a message or if a podcast or if a film has to go through, Can you tell me if you think that this same podcast that I'm doing now, this episode, I should put it on? I should put it on the media. What do you think about that? Is it worth it? Is it not?
Well, David, that's a really interesting question to ask us.
Yeah, it's like you're asking us to use that AI filter on ourselves.
Given everything we've discussed about
Yes.
value and diverse perspectives.
If our podcast were to go through that kind of filter, would it make the cut?
And I think the honest answer is it's difficult to say.
Because it really depends on what the AI is programmed to value.
And what kind of criteria would use to decide what's worth it.
Because we've talked a lot about how it's not about quantity of voices.
But instead, it's because you've been a key part of this podcast episode. We're very happy you're here.
And I think it's fair to say that we've covered all the material.
And have had a great discussion
Oh,
that
no.
takes into consideration all the points.
But with that in mind, let's wrap up this episode.
And do that without silencing other voices that need to be heard.
Absolutely. That's what we all need to consider, a really important question. Oh yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah, you avoided my question, I see. But please say yes or no, just to my question. Should I put this episode online? Tell me. Just say yes or no, and I'll do it. Thank you.
Okay, David, I understand you want a yes or no answer.
Yes.
And yeah, we can definitely do that for you.
But first, I do want to say we're not trying to avoid the question.
It's just that we've been talking all about how to value opinions.
And it really does depend on how you define worth it.
Okay, but with that in mind, if you want a straight answer,
If we were to decide based on whether it brought value, then yes.
yeah, I think so
Yes.
too. It really has been a valuable
Yes,
conversation.
Yes, yes,
We've
yes.
had a great discussion that
Good.
takes into consideration all the points.
And we definitely value your input because you've been a key part of this episode.
So yes, I think you should put it online based on
Okay.
everything we've talked about.
And it's fair to say that we've covered all the material.
And we've had an interesting discussion that really ties together all our points.
So with that in mind, let's wrap up this episode
And we can do so
Okay,
without
yes,
silencing
you can
any
wrap it up
voices.
now.
because we've done our best to bring value to the discussion.
We're very happy that you are here, and so are all the other voices.
It's important to remember not everyone needs to have a say, but everyone should be heard.
And we've heard you loud and clear today. It's always a pleasure chatting with you, David.
Thanks for listening and
Thank
contributing to
you.
the conversation. Your feedback really made this one special.
We'll see you next time. It was great to chat with you again today.
See you later. Thanks for your insights and opinions.
Thank you.